morning, everybody. My name is Mackenzie Westcott, and this is my older adult oral video presentation for Social Work 501. The adult I chose to interview is actually a relative of mine in Florida. She's been living there for quite some time now, and I think after this video presentation, it will be clear as to why Florida was her choice, or at least, if nothing else, it will be clear as to why she chose to move or anything like that. And if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to email me at the end. So my older adult, I chose to take the stage of Erickson's called generativity versus stagnation. Generativity is investment. So referring to being invested in the things around you. For example, if an adult enjoys their work, their family, and their community, they may get involved in activities like the soup kitchen or something in their kids' school, something along those lines. It's just showing that they want to make a difference in the world for future generations. Stagnation is a little bit different. It's considered something along the lines of being self-absorbed. Stagnation means that the adult hasn't made it through a stage without being self-absorbed, and that they weren't able to be useful to others in the aspect of family and their community. Therefore, they weren't involved in other activities like volunteering and stuff like that. This means that they didn't seek to make the same changes to future generations as someone who is more generative. So in the developmental stage, something that I didn't think was touched on too much was trauma. And this is where I think my interviewee kind of falls into stagnation a little bit for at least some time. So the trauma the interviewee faced included things like an affair that led to a divorce and the loss of her home. So before all of this trauma happened, my interviewee seemed to be very invested in others at the start of the developmental stage. But after these traumatic experiences, the interviewee seemed to stop investing in themselves and the people around them. After the interviewee's husband had an affair, which lasted for 6 years without the interviewee even knowing, she seemed to stop caring about herself and the people around her, which was uncharacteristic of her. So she adapted a lifestyle that allowed no one to really get close to her. At this point, the interviewee showed to be in an agnetic stage, which is an expansion of Erickson's stages, and it's in an article by Cheryl Bradley and James Marcia. And they talk about agnetic as something when a person is highly involved with themselves, but not with other people. So that pretty much is the definition of self-absorbed. And then, so she got stuck in this stage and she wasn't able to bring herself out of that. But shortly after dealing with the affair, she had another traumatic event, which led her to revert even more. She had a fire and she lost her home in this fire. And she lost her belongings and her memories and things that she enjoyed of her children. This led her to revert even more, but she also had to find people to rely on to help her during this, which meant having to actually allow someone in. So this meant we started to see a little bit of a transition from being agenetic to maybe investing in other people by relying on them or something along those lines. It's kind of just where we start to see a change in things a little bit. So moving on was a big deal for my interviewee. And how do you move on after all of that? I mean, you lost your husband, in a divorce and you lost your home and your memories of your children and everything. How do you move on from that? Well, something that my interviewee did was having to overcome the trauma. She had to move on and she had to find a new home to begin with. So moving, and she did this a couple times because it was something that she moved to one house, but she didn't feel she was there, and she didn't feel it was home. And something she had always wanted to do was live in Florida. So that's exactly what she did. She needed to give back, and she needed to pick herself up. She needed to give back to the people who helped her, to the people who helped her after the fire, to the people who were there for her after her divorce when she didn't want anybody else there. And she moved one time, and after moving to Florida, realized that she could become involved in that community, and she could become involved in those people, and she could find a support network. So currently she does still reside in Florida, which we've already talked about, and that is the reason why. However, going through experiences like this, the interviewer had to choose to focus on herself and bettering herself so that she could help better the process of getting involved and bettering people's lives. So after she started to do that, we see the transition from going from a genetic to a generative stage, meaning she's investing herself and the people around her. So the psychosocial crisis in this interviewee's case is not knowing who you are or where you come from after such a traumatic experience. So she had to find her way from not caring about others after her divorce and reverting to being alone, to finding a caring nature again and being who she used to be before her divorce. In order to help her grow, that is exactly what she needed to do. So the interviewee stated something that really stuck in my head, and it was, without the tough parts of life, I wouldn't be able to help others through the tough parts of theirs. And I think that statement alone is showing her transition from not knowing who she was anymore to finding herself and moving to a generative stage. So, moving on a little bit to, again, sticking with the psychosocial crisis, but her social functioning. So she wasn't working at the time. She was playing the role of a homemaker. And I think something important here I wanted to state was an article by Johanna Malone talks about late life depression when there's no support in earlier stages. So this article was a study done that shows there is a correlation between support and late life depression. So that can definitely be seen with this interviewee. So although she did have her struggles and she was not working because of being a homemaker for so many years, which led to things like being in a decreased social class and having to build a new support network and finding people in that support network that share your beliefs and your culture so that it's something that you can carry on. I think these are all struggles that someone at the time was mid-40s. I think that's all something that, made it more difficult because at that age she felt like she should have known who she was. However, she was able to find a support network with the same beliefs, and she was able to get through it. And there's where the correlation is shown, is because she had that support network, and you don't see late life depression with her. Something else important is for this resolution is in Charles Slater's article, he talks about concepts of each stage. And I think just to touch real quickly, it's important that we recognize that in crises, we often have to solve something before we can move past it. And I think that's exactly what this interviewee did in this instance.